Alright folks, Urban Sentinel here. For my subscribers, do me a favor, share this video with people that you are looking to get into prepping, that you're talking to, that are willing to come on board and starting to believe that, this is something they need to do. For anyone new to this channel coming onto here and you're just getting into prepping, you're just effectively waking up to the idea that this is something that needs to be done, welcome. Now this is a 5 list item. It's not a top 5, it's not the only 5, it's not the end all list, but these are 5 items, 5 areas I'll say that new preppers need to start with and then build upon their preps from there. So right off the top, first aid, that's your number 1. You can go online and you can look and do your research, and there's a plethora of information about first aid kits, but we're going to keep it simple. Start with one of those small or medium sized pre-made first aid kits that usually is like a 30-piece to a 50-piece. It's pretty much band-aids and some bandages and alcohol wipes, but you start with that and then you build upon it. You start adding more gauze roll, tape, you want to add in some hydrocortisone, anti-itch cream, hydrogen peroxide, things like that, and you start building up your first aid kit from there. But you also want to include over-the-counter medicines. You want to be able to include your basic pain meds, your Tylenols, your aspirins, your cold and flu meds to help mitigate the symptoms of those things. You want to be able to add in extra itch cream for, let's say, poison ivy, bug bites, that sort of thing. Begin adding those in and building upon the first aid kit from there. As you progress, you're going to start looking at what you would hopefully not have to come across, but you should start building up from there. Then you start looking at the additional gauze bandages, and you look at the blood clot materials and things like that, basically for severe punctures and lacerations and things of that sort. And if you have the opportunity, I suggest definitely taking a basic first aid course, learning some CPR, do some research, look at what you are capable of handling, and understand that everyone is different on their skill levels. I know people that talking about blood makes them nauseous and lightheaded, let alone being in a situation where they're actually seeing blood, whether it's theirs or someone else's, can be something that you may have to take into consideration. Moving on from that, you look at the number 2, lighters, fire starters, flashlights, basic stuff. Start with some big lighters. You don't have to get fancy. Just start with a pack of big lighters, start with small fire starting materials. This is primarily for what it sounds like, for starting a fire, primarily for cooking or keeping warm. Flashlights, same thing. You want to have a few flashlights handy. Sometimes they come in packs of 2 where you'll have a larger 8-inch flashlight and maybe a smaller 4-inch flashlight. Avoid the ones that are made with the cheap lightweight plastic, simply because you drop those or they bang against something, the housing tends to crack, and then the flashlight tends to stop working. So you want something that has either an aluminum casing, or it's at least a heavier, thicker plastic designed to take a little more impact, and always have at least 1 or 2 sets of extra batteries for those flashlights and keep them handy. Number 3, paper maps, markers, notepads, pens, and pencils. You're going to need them. Based upon a grid down situation where the internet's no longer available, cell phone communications are down, things of that sort, having paper maps of your state, your region, the city that you're in, or the surrounding towns is going to be necessary. If you have a plan to bug in and stay where you're at because you don't have someplace else to go, you definitely still want to have paper maps. Even if you know your town, you know your city. The reason being is, with the paper maps, you can mark off areas on the map. You can mark off the gas stations, the grocery stores, you can mark off all the different locations that have available resources beneficial to you. Now, in a grid down situation, there's going to be panic, there's going to be confusion, there's going to be looting, there's going to be general chaos, and there's going to be a certain point where nothing is where it should be, as they say. But having things marked out on a map is also beneficial when you're trying to plan a route, because you may traditionally think of going down this street, turning left here, going up this road over here by the roads and the sidewalks. That will not always be a safe and smart thing to do. There will be times where you're going to have to cut through yards, go down alleyways, cut through property to get from one point to the next point. With the maps that are available online, you can go on and see, in many cases, the physical structures outlined on the map, so you have an idea of where the buildings lead to, where the alleyways go to, not simply going by the streets that you navigate around, but having a notepad to write notes down, instructions, markers, especially Sharpies, so you can write them on different surfaces. You may want to leave a message for someone, so you only have effectively a wall to write a message down, something like that, but keep those handy. Moving on to number 4, energy bars. Keeping it simple again, getting into stocking up food supplies from your grocery store is always a plus. Always buy extra, but getting the freeze-dried food and the MREs, that's also something you can do. But start with a few energy bars, things that have protein, high calories, and carbohydrates, because you're going on the basis that in the immediate event that occurs, you might be in a situation where your power is out or you're not able to stay in your place, as it were. Energy bars, you can pack in, 4 or 5 bars into a small bag and keep them with you. 1 or 2 bottles of water. Again, this is not going to last you weeks down the road. This is for an immediate emergency, but it will be enough to hopefully get you through 1, 2, 3 days, because with prepping, that's the general rule. You want to build your supplies up to go 3 days, and then 3 weeks, then 3 months, and eventually past the 1-year point. But bringing it back in to start with the 3 days. You want to have enough just to get you by with whatever you have, whatever you can carry for 3 days, because you don't want to be overloaded with stuff that you're eventually going to have to ditch. You want to be able to manage everything that you have if you have to bug out. If you move on to, let's say, planning a relocation to another area, depending upon what it is, maybe you can store supplies there. But you're going on the basis that right now you're in your apartment, your house, wherever you're at, and you're going to try to stay in. But if you have to then at this point leave, you're going to want to travel fast and light wherever possible. Number 5, change of clothes. Now with that ties into a lot of things. Plan your change of clothes, your spare clothes, clothes that you're not going to effectively worry about not having in your daily rotation, but plan for the seasons. I live in New England, and we get all 4 seasons 6 times a year. So when I have my change of clothes set up, when it gets closer to winter time, I swap out the lighter shirts and t-shirts and rain jackets for long underwear, thick socks, and sweatshirts. This way, no matter what, my bug out bag has at least a set of clothing environmentally appropriate for the season that I'm roughly in. And of course, you put it into a bag, a backpack or a duffel bag. If you use a duffel bag or a backpack, it should be a thicker material, heavier nylon. There are those inexpensive little backpacks that you would see little kids have going to school. Those aren't really going to last. They're not designed to hold the type of weight. And if you basically are, running and gunning, moving and scooting, and it starts getting snagged and abrased, it's going to rip open at the seams, the straps, and every place else. So buy a decent backpack. You don't have to go crazy with a, $200, super pack or anything like that. But start with something that can have pockets inside and outside, and you can put everything in. Store your stuff, when possible, in Ziploc bags, Glad bags. Get the 2-gallon and the 1-gallon. If you fold your clothes properly, you should be able to keep some of them in a 2-gallon bag. Definitely the items I mentioned, the first aid kit and the other stuff, you start putting it in there. 2 primary reasons. 1, it keeps everything from flying all over the place. So when you pull out a bag, you know what's in that bag. It's easier to see the items. It's easier to retrieve what you need, put the rest back in. It'll help keep things dry and safe, such as your paper maps and things of that sort. And again, it just makes organization, which is the key thing for prepping. You have to be able to stay organized, because especially in a stressful situation, you may not be thinking clearly. You may be kind of, fog-headed. And if you've got everything scrambled about inside this bag and you're trying to find something, you could overlook it 3, 4, 5 times because you're just not focused. But if you have 3 or 4 bags that you can pull out and you can see what the items are, you can grab it, open it up, and use the item that you need. And like I said before, this is not an end-all list. Everything that I just said, you're going to keep building upon, and there's other things that it will expand into. There are other categories and subcategories within these groups that build out. But for brand new preppers that basically you're just getting started, you start with these 5 and you work your way up and build up from there. Because that's what the basic tenet is you take and you build up from a small point and add on to it. You start building up your food supplies, you start building up your first aid, you start building up all these small little gear items that you really don't think about, and you start getting them. You start looking at buying things, buying one extra, You know, when you see a 2-for-1, get the 2-for-1. When, you know, it comes down to you find something that's on sale now, especially the way prices are going up, maybe it's the time to buy it. You have to start looking and managing what you can. And not everyone is in the same financial situation, and not everyone has the same amount of space to store things or has the same amount of time to really do things. But you always have just enough time to keep planning for what the next thing that you're going to do, the next item that you're going to get. So with that being said, I'll let you guys go, and I'll catch you in the next one.